Hello, my name is Liam Dean. I am a Senior Principal Analyst for Games Technology at Omdia. In this presentation, I will be covering the 2026 edition of our Market Radar on Cloud Platforms for Games, our annual benchmark of cloud platforms against the requirements of the games industry. This will have three parts. First, we will look at some market data and trends, then at the methodology and how we put our report and assessment together, and finally, a vendor spotlight on one of the key platforms covered in the report, Tencent Cloud. So let's start by looking at market size and growth. Operations, so that is the technology for launching and operating live games, is one of the fastest growing areas of games technology spending, accounting for about $16 billion this year, according to Omdia's Games Tech Market Forecast. The primary driver of that is game servers, the core infrastructure, which is about $8 billion, around half of total. And another $2.5 billion is contributed by back-end services and solutions on top of that. Then, as well as that core infrastructure, we also have a range of supporting technology and solutions, including analytics, which at about $3 billion in global spending is the largest segment outside servers, and then other important areas for operating live games in 2026, LiveOps, multiplayer, identity, and so on. These segments do differ from each other in various ways. One notable one is who the relevant players are. So servers and backend are supplied almost entirely by the platforms covered in this report, cloud platforms, whereas areas like analytics, multiplayer, and LiveOps are more complicated, contested, or in some cases covered in partnership by cloud platforms and independent specialists within these areas. So this has been a very fast-growing market in recent years and will continue to be so. We expect it to reach some $24.8 billion, according to Omdia's forecast, by 2030. So that will be growth of 52% from the 2026 baseline. So spending is growing, but competition is also increasing. And we're seeing three main axes on which cloud platforms are differentiating. The first are cloud-specific services. So these are managed offerings that absorb things like orchestration, matchmaking, fleet management, which are becoming at least as important as raw infrastructure in providing a product that is tailored to the specific needs of games companies. Then we have AI, and specifically AI built for the needs of game developers. Again, that specialization is key. So, of course, we have things like foundation model access and AI governance, but making sure that you have that specific tooling and that you're able to offer costs appropriate and latency sensitive inference at gameplay scale is really important to making this a viable offering for the games industry in particular. And then we have commercial predictability. So we've seen some major moves on things like egress and bandwidth pricing, predictability of scaling costs, and more sovereignty and residency options for data, all of which is a sign of growing competition in the market as well. So the raw infrastructure price performance that might have been the key decider in the past is not as decisive as it used to be. So a selection process that only looks at the core costs of compute and storage will actually miss some of the most important differentiators in the market today. And there are factors making cloud strategy increasingly complex for game developers. Notably, platform choice is really not a binary decision anymore. So while cloud platforms are very sticky, we see this in our game developer collective survey series, which shows that developers rarely outright change platforms. You have to contextualize this by remembering that multi-cloud is very much the standard these days, particularly at larger studios. In effect, cloud platforms compete for a share of the stack rather than a monopoly on a particular customer's business. So getting that more complex balance right is a bit trickier. Then, of course, we have planning for AI and uncertainty about the appropriate level of investment, balancing the need to keep up with a rapidly advancing technology area with industry skepticism in some quarters or uncertainty about the most effective use cases. So game studios need to plan when and where to invest in AI. We see some areas already racing ahead, coding in particular in our surveys, accounting for over 60% of AI users in the games industry, as well as areas like 2D asset creation and localization already coming to the fore as well. But whatever the pace of this investment, nearly all of it is going to end up running on cloud infrastructure. Neither training nor inference is really practical on local hardware at scale. And it's notable as well that the workload profile here is remarkably similar to what we see from game servers. We're looking at workloads that must be low latency, that require real-time state, bursty concurrency, global distribution, and so on. So what that means is that those platforms that have solved game servers are really positioned to lead on AI in the future as well. That's the market context. So now let's move on to the specifics of this market radar and how the assessment is built. The market radar covers 9 platforms that are very different in scale and strategy, so comparing them needs a common and consistent method. We use a variety of inputs to achieve that. The first of which is vendor questionnaires. We send out detailed questionnaires to all of the featured vendors, allowing side-by-side comparison at a very granular level of the capabilities on offer. We make use of proprietary Omdia market data, some of which I've referred to already. So this will include things like the Games Tech market forecast, tracking spending trends, our game developer collective surveys of developers looking at priorities and intent at the game studio level, and our Games Tech market landscape, which tracks the wider technology ecosystem. Then we add in additional sources, financials, and other public data, contextualizing the position of the key market players. And finally, the human touch, our analyst assessment, where our expert analysis synthesizes these sources to reach the final conclusions. And it's important to note as well that an Omdia market radar is fully editorially independent, and vendors do not pay for inclusion or placement in a market radar. So those sources are then all combined and fed into a framework made up of 8 capability categories. That includes game development, game servers, AI and machine learning, multiplayer services, LiveOps, database and analytics, security and compliance, and partners and integrations. There are 2 changes to this framework as of this year's report compared to the previous year. The larger one is that security and compliance is now a standalone category, reflecting the increased importance of that area in selecting a cloud platform. And we've also increased the weight applied to AI and machine learning, which of course is also an area of growing importance in the market. Then for each one of these capability tiers, we apply a rating of advanced, broad, functional, or partial, depending on the vendor's ability to reach the needs of game developers within each one of those capabilities. And based on that overall assessment, we assign a final rating to each vendor as either a market leader. So these are the vendors which can provide leading solutions with advanced capabilities across a wide range of areas, or market challenger, which may have some advanced or broad capabilities, but perhaps more limited functionality in other areas. So no single platform leads across all 8 areas, and the right platform choice is, of course, not necessarily the same for every customer. A mobile studio consolidating its analytics might not be looking for the same kind of solution as a AAA publisher provisioning launch capacity. So applying all of that across the 9 platforms gives us this year's outcome, which you can see summarized here. So you can see that we have categorized all of the vendors into 2 groups of the 4 market leaders and the 5 challengers. And the market leaders are those platforms that are capable of addressing virtually all major games use cases more or less end to end, whereas the market challengers have somewhat narrower solutions that can have an important role to play, but are less comprehensive overall. So for the final section of the presentation, we'll do a deep dive on one of those market leaders, Tencent Cloud. So here once again is the 2026 assessment for Tencent Cloud specifically, and we see that this vendor is rated as having an advanced capability in 4 areas and a broad capability in each of the other 4. And we'll go through all of these in turn, starting with those advanced areas. Game servers. This is an area which is, of course, at the core of any cloud offering. And here we see that Tencent Cloud has assembled a strong proposition with 23 regions, up by 2 in the last year, 66 availability zones, that's up by 10, and servers with over 1 million servers and more than 3,000 edge nodes worldwide. And of course, it's not just scale. We also have hosting, adding auto scaling and life cycle management, delivery, adding connection flood protection, intelligent routing for cross-region play, and deployment for bare metal without virtualization overhead and for latency sensitive workloads. It's very much worth mentioning as well that this infrastructure and tooling has been validated on leading Tencent first-party titles, the likes of Honor of Kings and PUBG Mobile. So customers do have that certainty that this is infrastructure that has been proven to work on some of the leading titles in the games market. Then we have LiveOps and multiplayer, another major area of strength. So that includes things like the game multimedia engagement solution, which was rebranded this year as it expands into a full lifecycle suite, connecting gameplay through to language models and speech synthesis, covering every aspect of voice-related technology throughout the game lifecycle. We have LiveOps with authentication, content management, and deployment solutions, as well as in-game economies and player progression, and a variety of real-time solutions. For instance, the TRTC conversational AI, which targets sub 1000 millisecond dialogue latency, and the anti-cheat expert real-time anti-cheat solution are 2 examples of areas where we have real-time solutions able to keep up with the demands of modern live service games. And all of this is, again, has been validated on live titles and is in some ways an example of some of the technology and knowledge that we see coming out of the Chinese live service market, which in many respects is at this stage ahead of its Western equivalents, and this depth of live ops and multiplayer capability very much reflects that. And of course, we have AI and machine learning. Even more so than other cloud vendors, Tencent has made AI the center of its offer to the games market in 2026. We have a full AI stack covering compute, so with GPU instances and RDMA clusters, its TI1 platform for managed training and inference acceleration via Taco LLM, some of those capabilities at the compute layer, providing the foundation for models, both first-party models such as Hunyan covering text, image, video, and 3D, as well as integrations with a wider range of first and third-party models via its Token Hub API, and a leading application layer as well. And we would see things like Hunyan 3D for asset generation, the agent development platform for in-game dialogue and NPCs, and the Acorn automated testing and defect analysis of examples of leading solutions at the application layer. So a very comprehensive coverage across the entire AI stack. The remaining four categories were rated broad, which, as a reminder, means capabilities better than expected, well suited to the need of most businesses. That includes game development, where we have cloud workstations, GPU instances, and build pipelines, along with code hosting integrated with Unity, Unreal, and Cocos. Database and analytics with purpose-built game state database and general data warehouses, along with data governance and player experience dashboards. On security and compliance, we have all of the expected capabilities, including access management, enterprise SSO, along with data residency and regional certifications. And on partners and integrations, Tencent, of course, boasts a very strong integration with the Chinese software ecosystem, as well as growing integrations with Western software solutions as well. Just in the last year, we've seen integrations added with tools like Cinema 4D, 3D AI Studio, and CG Trader. The final element that we take into account in our overall assessment is market impact. And here we see a growing global footprint for Tencent Cloud. And we've already mentioned that infrastructure footprint all around the globe, which has continued to expand. And that's really a reflection of a growing global business. We see Southeast Asia notably emerging as a stronghold of Tencent Cloud's overseas business in the games industry, but also substantial growing business in North America and Europe as well. We have seen AI acting as a bridge, which is increasing integration with Western software ecosystems. And we're also seeing global commercial initiatives, including startup credits, mini game consumption rebates, and an overseas expansion accelerator, all of which are increasing the attractiveness of the platform to developers right around the globe. So to summarize all of that, here we can see the final rating of Tencent Cloud from this year's Omdia Market Radar Cloud Platforms for Games, in which we assess that Tencent Cloud offers a wide range of games-native tools derived from its own titles, with particular strengths in multiplayer and live service support and increasingly capable AI-powered services. That brings me to a close for this presentation, but you can find all of this and much more in the full Omdia Market Radar Cloud Platforms for Games 2026 report, which is available to download now.